Will believers play a part in the crushing of Satan's head? How is the seed prophecy ultimately fulfilled? And what does the prophet Joel have to say about the return of Jesus? All this and more. Welcome to the Berean Wire. Hello, my name is Nick, and welcome to the Berean Wire. And like the Bereans in Acts 17, we ought to examine the scriptures daily and test what we are learning, doing our own research. Now, last session, I introduced the concept of the very first prophecy and several of the first prophecies given to us in Scripture, the first one being the seed prophecy of God cursing Satan and his seed, and showing this enmity that is sowed between the seed of Satan and the seed of Eve. Click the card in the upper right-hand corner of this video to watch that. I ended the last session introducing this concept of this wine press, of God treading this wine press, and I want to go down this rabbit hole further to begin this session. So jumping right in, we're going to look at the prophet Joel, and specifically in chapter 3, verses 9 through 16. Proclaim this among the nations, consecrate for war, stir up the mighty men, let all the men of war draw near, let them come up. Beat your plowshares into swords, and your pruning hooks into spears. Let the weak say, I am a warrior. Hasten and come, all you surrounding nations, and gather yourselves there. Bring down your warriors, O YHWH. Let the nations stir themselves up and come to the valley of Jehoshaphat. For there I will sit to judge all the surrounding nations. Put in the sickle, for the harvest is ripe. Go in, tread, for the winepress is full. The vats overflow, for their evil is great. Multitudes in the valley of decision, for the day of YHWH is near in the valley of decision. The sun and the moon are darkened, and the stars withdraw their shining. YHWH roars from Zion and utters his voice from Jerusalem, and the heavens and the earth quake. But YHWH is a refuge to his people, a stronghold to the people of Israel. Now, what we have in this passage is a very militaristic style passage talking of war and warriors, swords, preparing for this great battle in this valley of decision. These nations that are, what we'll find out, are ultimately led by Satan, trying to prevent his inevitable doom, trying to inflict as much damage on the seed of Eve, the children of Israel specifically. Now, what we have here is a very eschatological image of these celestial objects being changed, the sun darkened, the moon turning to blood, the stars withdrawing their shining. Now, just as a side note here, there are some people that will try and time these events because, hey, the sun being darkened, that's an eclipse. The moon being turned to blood, that's a lunar eclipse. So we got to figure out when this is happening at the same time, and then we know the date of when this is happening. I will caution very much against doing such things because first of all, if these events are to happen at the same time, it's completely physically impossible because for a solar eclipse to happen, the sun and moon have to be in line with one another, so the moon in between the earth and the sun. And for a lunar eclipse, it has to go sun, earth, moon. So the moon has to be on the completely other side of the earth, which is bare minimum 14 days apart. So base point, don't try and time these events. This is a miraculous thing that God causes to happen. Now I want to give us a little bit better context to this passage in Joel. So we're going to go to the beginning of this chapter, to the first few verses there. And these read, For behold, in those days and at that time, when I restore the fortunes of Judah and Jerusalem, I will gather all the nations and bring them down to the valley of Jehoshaphat, and I will enter into judgment with them there, on behalf of my people and my heritage, Israel, because they have scattered them among the nations and have divided up my land, and have cast lots for my people, and have traded a boy for a prostitute, and have sold a girl for wine, and have drunk it. Now, this valley of Jehoshaphat is not very clearly identifiable with any known location, but what most commentators will say is this is actually the valley that is in between the Temple Mount, Mount Zion, and the Mount of Olives. So in between those, you have what is called right now the Kidron Valley, and this is called the Valley of Jehoshaphat. And Jehoshaphat, that translates as YHWH judges. So literally, it's called the Valley of YHWH's judgment. Now, this judgment could either be more of a courtroom style type of a judgment, or it could be more in a battle sense, like we find out later in this chapter. I tend to favor the battle sequence of it, but there's no reason why there couldn't be a future courtroom style setting there at the same time, but at the same time, it could be both, the fact that God is judging the nations by going into battle with them. Now, what we can really glean at its more core principle here is that God is judging all the nations in Israel at some point in time after he has And in the process, he is treading this winepress that we've been focusing in on. And the Kidron Valley has been historically known as more of a necropolis where they put dead people. So that kind of meshes with this idea of this valley of God's judgment where he's going to slay a bunch of people. So that's why I tend to favor the militaristic, warlike setting of this judgment. Now, so far, through the first session and this session, I have not used any New Testament or Daniel references. And this is on purpose, because too often we allow the New Testament and Daniel to largely inform us of eschatology. But what we end up doing is we're missing out on a plethora of other passages that give so much more detail and fill in a lot of blanks as to what's going to go, as to what's happening, and to give us a better context. So I want to actually go to Revelation right now to kind of build upon this concept of the winepress, because we find a couple different references to this winepress within Revelation. In Revelation 14 through 20, we read this. Then I looked, and behold, a white cloud, and seated on the cloud, one like a son of man, with a golden crown on his head, and a sharp sickle in his hand. And another angel came out of the temple, calling with a loud voice to him who sat on the cloud, Put in your sickle, and reap, for the hour to reap has come, for the harvest of the earth is fully ripe. So he who sat on the cloud swung his sickle across the earth, and the earth was reaped. Then another angel came out of the temple in heaven, and he too had a sharp sickle. And another angel came out from the altar, the angel who has authority over the fire. And he called with a loud voice to the one who had the sharp sickle, Put in your sickle, and gather the clusters from the vine of the earth, for its grapes are ripe. So the angel swung his sickle across the earth, and gathered the grape harvest of the earth, and threw it into the great winepress of the wrath of YHWH. And the winepress was trodden outside the city, and the blood flowed from the winepress as high as a horse's bridle for 1,600 stadia. Now, a bridle is about 4 to 6 feet high, and a 1,600 stadia is about 184 miles. So what we learned from the intro video is there is this Son of Man that rides on a cloud, and we know this to be Jesus, the Messiah, for YHWH is the only cloud rider in existence. Now, unfortunately, though, this character in Revelation 14 tends to be a little controversial. Some people don't think it's Jesus. Some people just think it's some angel. I think it's very strongly and very clearly, plainly Jesus, the Son of Man riding on a cloud that we see from Daniel 7. And in this passage, we have two different harvests. We have the harvest of the righteous, and we have the harvest of the wicked that are thrown into the great winepress of the wrath of YHWH. And I want to just focus on this second harvest for this session. I will deal with the first harvest in another session. So we get these images of the sickle and the winepress that we learn from Joel chapter 3. This passage has direct callbacks to Joel and Isaiah, the passage that I mentioned in the previous session, and even another passage in Jeremiah chapter 51 verse 33. For thus says YHWH Sabaoth, the God of Israel, the daughter of Babylon is like a threshing floor at the time when it is trodden. Yet a little while, and the time of her harvest will come. Now, the greater context of Revelation 14 is this. It's a pause in between the shofar, the trumpet judgments. The seventh trumpet was blown at the end of Revelation chapter 11. Chapters 12 and 13 deal with Satan and the woman and Satan's antichrist beast empire. And chapter 14 begins with a vision of the 144,000 that we learned of way back in Revelation 7. And then we get these three messenger angels. The first one proclaiming the eternal gospel. The second one pronouncing that Babylon has fallen. This is the first reference to Babylon that we don't even see until Revelation 16 and 17, where it's built upon further after the bowl judgments. And the final angel gives a warning to those who have taken the mark of the beast and have worshipped his image. And then we get to this setting of these two harvests. Now, I want to look at a very similar, arguably a parallel passage of Revelation 19 when we finally get to see Jesus' second coming. So Revelation 19 verses 11 through 21 read this. Then I saw heaven opened, and behold, a white horse. The one sitting on it is called Faithful and True, and in righteousness he judges and makes war. His eyes are like a flame of fire, and on his head are many diadems, and he has a name written that no one knows but himself. He is clothed in a robe dipped in or sprinkled with blood. And the name by which he is called is the Word of YHWH. And the armies of heaven, arrayed in fine linen, white and pure, were following him on white horses. From his mouth comes a sharp sword, with which to strike down the nations, and he will rule them with a rod of iron. He will tread the winepress of the fury of the wrath of YHWH Shaddai. On his robe and on his thigh he has a name written, King of kings and Lord of lords. Then I saw an angel standing in the sun, and with a loud voice he called to all the birds that fly directly overhead, "Come, gather for the great supper of YHWH, to eat the flesh of kings, the flesh of captains, the flesh of mighty men, the flesh of horses and their riders, and the flesh of all men, both free and slave, both small and great." And I saw the beast and the kings of the earth with their armies gathered to make war against him who was sitting on the horse and against his army. This is such a beautiful, triumphant, victorious scene where we finally get to see the revealing of Yeshua, Jesus, triumphant, coming in his glory. It's so full of hope and inspiration, but we also get the justice and vindication of eons past that we've been waiting for. I will deal with this passage far more in depth as we keep going, but what I really wanted to focus in on was the parallel passages of this wine press of the Wrath of YHWH. So I'm going to switch gears here because I have yet to tell you how the seed prophecy is ultimately fulfilled, because that's what we began with, and we need to see how this is fully ultimately fulfilled. The crushing of Satan's head. So let's go to Isaiah chapter 24, verses 21 through 23. On that day, YHWH will punish the host of heaven in heaven, and the kings of the earth on the earth. They will be gathered together as prisoners in a pit. They will be shut up in a prison, and after many days they will be punished. And the moon will be confounded, and the sun ashamed, for YHWH Sabaoth reigns on Mount Zion and in Jerusalem, and his glory will be before his elders. Isaiah 27, verse 1. In that day, YHWH, with his hard and great and strong sword, will punish Leviathan, the fleeing serpent, Leviathan, the twisting serpent, and he will slay the dragon that is in the sea. Ezekiel 28, 11 through 19. Son of man, raise a lamentation over the king of Tyre, and say to him, Thus says Adonai YHWH, you are the signet of perfection, full of wisdom and perfect in beauty. You were in Eden, the garden of YHWH. Every precious stone was your covering, sardius, topaz, and diamond, beryl, onyx, and jasper, lapis, lazuli, emerald, and carbuncle. And crafted in gold were your settings and your engravings. On the day that you were created, they were prepared. You were an anointed guardian cherub. I placed you. You were on the holy mountain of YHWH. In the midst of the stones of fire you walked. You were blameless in all your ways. From the day you were created, till unrighteousness was found in you. In the abundance of your trade you were filled with violence in your midst, and you sinned. So I cast you as a profane thing from the mountain of YHWH, and I destroyed you. I banished you, O guardian cherub, from the midst of the stones of fire. Your heart was proud because of your beauty. You corrupted your wisdom for the sake of your splendor. I cast you to the ground. I expose you before kings, to feast their eyes on you. By the multitude of your iniquities, and the unrighteousness of your trade, you profaned your sanctuaries. So I brought fire out from your midst. It consumed you. And I turned you to ashes on the earth in the sight of all who saw you. All who know you among the peoples are appalled you. You have come to a dreadful end, and shall be no more forever. Ezekiel 38, 16 through 23. You will come up against my people, Israel, like a cloud covering the land. In the latter days I will bring you against my land, that the nations may know me, when through you, O Gog, I vindicate my holiness before their eyes. Thus says Adonai YHWH, are you he of whom I spoke of in former days by my servants, the prophets of Israel, who in those days prophesied for years that I would bring you against them? But on that day, the day that Gog shall come against the land of Israel, declares Adonai YHWH, my wrath will be roused in my anger. For in my jealousy and in my blazing wrath I declare, on that day there shall be a great earthquake in the land of Israel. The fish of the sea and the birds of the heavens and the beasts of the field and all creeping things that creep on the ground, and all the people who are on the face of the earth shall quake at my presence. And the mountains shall be thrown down, and the cliffs shall fall, and every wall shall tumble to the ground. I will summon a sword against Gog on all my mountains, declares Adonai YHWH. Every man's sword will be against his brother. With pestilence and bloodshed I will enter into judgment with him, and I will rain upon him and his hordes and the many peoples who are with him, torrential rains and hailstones, fire and sulfur. So I will show my greatness and my holiness and make myself known in the eyes of many nations, and they will know that I am YHWH. This is a very controversial passage, being Ezekiel 38 and 39, the battle of Gog and Magog. But at its core, in the basics, it is dealing with war and bloodshed and ultimately the downfall of Satan. Later on, Ezekiel 39, 17 through 24. As for you, O son of man, thus says Adonai YHWH, speak to the birds of every sort and to all beasts of the field. Assemble and come. Gather from all around to the sacrificial feast that I am preparing for you, a great sacrificial feast on the mountains of Israel. And you shall eat flesh and drink blood. You shall eat the flesh of the mighty, and drink the blood of the princes of the earth, of rams, of lambs, and of he-goats, of bulls, all of them fat feasts of Bashan. And you shall eat fat until you are filled, and drink blood till you are drunk, at the sacrificial feast that I am preparing for you. And you shall be filled at my table with horses and charioteers, with mighty men and all kinds of warriors, declares Adonai Jehovah. Now, this passage describes what I would like to call the Feast of Crows, which we get more details about in other passages like Isaiah chapter 18 verses 5 through 6, Isaiah 34:6, Jeremiah 46:10, and Revelation 19:17 through 18, which we just read. Now the last passage I want to deal with the fall of Satan, the crushing of his head, is an obvious one. Revelation chapter 20. Verses 7 through 10. And when the 1,000 years are ended, Satan will be released from his prison and will come out to deceive the nations that are at the four corners of the earth, Gog and Magog, to gather them for battle. Their number is like the sand of the sea. And they marched up over the broad plain of the earth and surrounded the camp of the saints and the beloved city. But fire came down from heaven, or from YHWH, or out of heaven from YHWH, and consumed them. And the devil who had deceived them was thrown into the lake of fire, and sulfur where the beast and the false prophet were, and they will be tormented day and night forever and ever. Hallelujah, amen. We have this confidence that though the present struggles of this earth will remain, we know that one day they will have an end once Yeshua, the seed of Eve, returns in his glory and might and crushes the head of Satan once and for all. And you know what's even more intriguing and fascinating? Is that we may actually even play a part in this ourselves. We read at the end of Romans in chapter 16:20 this: "The God of peace will soon crush Satan under your feet." Now, whatever this actually means, whether we actually get to play a direct part in the crushing of Satan's head, or if it has some more spiritual meaning to this, the core principle of it is that Satan's head is crushed once and for all, fulfilling the seed prophecy, the proto-evangelium. So that will do it for this session, and please join me as I keep going forward, establishing this basis, this foundation of taking a look at prophecy and all eschatology. Like this video if you are looking forward to crushing Satan's head under your feet. Subscribe and hit the notification bell so that you are notified when I am uploading new content. Comment down below what you think, and if I missed anything, but please do so in accordance with the fruits of the Spirit. And finally, blessed is he who comes in the name of YHWH. Blessings and Maranatha.